Imagine walking into a smoky pub, ordering a pint, and the bartender looks at you like you just spoke an alien language. These weren't just beers, they were legends, pouring into glasses for decades, shaping nights out across Britain before vanishing completely. Today we're uncovering 10 iconic British pub drinks that have disappeared from taps. If you've ever heard your parents or grandparents mention strange beer names from back in the day, hit like and subscribe. It's time to solve those liquid mysteries. 1. Watney's Red Barrel. In the 1960s, if you walked into any British pub worth its salt, you'd see the distinctive red pump of Watney's Red Barrel standing proudly behind the bar. This wasn't just beer, it was a revolution in a glass, the drink that would define an entire generation of pub culture. Watney's Red Barrel emerged during the keg beer boom of the 60s when breweries were desperately trying to modernize their image and capture the youth market. The beer was smooth, consistent, and served at the perfect temperature every single time. Unlike traditional cask ales that could vary from pub to pub, Red Barrel promised reliability, and Britain fell in love with that promise. What made Red Barrel truly iconic wasn't just its taste, but its marketing genius. The advertising campaigns were everywhere. Television commercials showing sophisticated city people enjoying their pints, billboards promising the beer that reaches the parts other beers cannot reach, and pub signs that became as familiar as street lamps. But as the decades rolled on, the very consistency that made it popular became its greatest weakness. The craft beer movement began to stir in the late 70s and 80s, and suddenly, beer drinkers wanted character over consistency. They craved the unpredictable charm of traditional ales, the slight variations that made each pint a small adventure. Red Barrel's mechanical perfection started to feel sterile, corporate, distant from the authentic pub experience that a new generation was seeking. And just when it seemed like keg beer would rule forever, everything began to change for British brewing. 2. Double Diamond. Step into any working man's pub in the 1970s, and chances are you'd hear someone ordering a Double Diamond. This Burton Pale Ale wasn't trying to be fancy or sophisticated. It was honest, approachable, and became the drink of choice for millions of ordinary British people. Double Diamond's rise began in the post-war boom when Incoop Brewery decided to create a beer that would appeal to the masses. The advertising became legendary. "A Double Diamond works wonders," the slogan promised. And for a while it seemed to deliver on that promise. By the mid-70s it was one of Britain's best-selling beers, yet success breeds its own destruction, and Double Diamond's reign couldn't last forever. The problem was that Double Diamond had become too successful, too everywhere. What once felt like the people's pint began to feel generic, lacking the personality that a new generation of drinkers craved. Independent breweries started offering alternatives that felt more authentic, more connected to local traditions. The final blow came when the brewery was sold and the recipe changed. Old-timers could taste the difference immediately. The smoothness was still there, but something essential had been lost. Word spread through the pub network like wildfire. "It's not the same anymore." Within a few years, Double Diamond had virtually disappeared from British bars. But the North had its own golden champion, and its story was just as tragic. 3. Stone's Bitter. In the steel city of Sheffield, there was one beer that flowed like liquid gold through every working man's pub: Stone's Bitter. This wasn't just a drink, it was liquid pride, the taste of a city that built Britain with its bare hands. Stone's emerged from the industrial heart of Yorkshire, created specifically for the workers who needed something clean, bitter and refreshing after long shifts in the steel mills. What set Stone's apart was its perfect balance. Not too heavy for a session, not too light to feel unsatisfying. For the working class of Sheffield and beyond, Stone's became more than a beverage. It was a reward, a small luxury that marked the end of another honest day's work. But even the strongest steel eventually rusts, and Stone's dominance couldn't last forever. The decline began as heavy industry retreated from British cities. The brewery changed hands multiple times, each new owner making small adjustments to the recipe, the marketing, the distribution. Long-time drinkers noticed these changes. The colour wasn't quite as golden, the bitterness not quite as clean, the character slowly diluted with each corporate decision. The new service economy brought different drinking patterns, and suddenly the robust bitter that had sustained generations of steelworkers felt out of place in wine bars and gastropubs. While the North mourned its golden bitter, the South was losing something even more precious. 4. King and Barnes Old Ale. While the North celebrated its golden bitters, Southern England had its own treasure, King and Barnes Old Ale, a dark, full-bodied brew that wrapped you in warmth like a wool coat on a winter evening. This wasn't beer for the masses, it was beer for connoisseurs, for people who understood that sometimes you needed something with more weight, more character, more soul. The beer was dark as mahogany, rich as Christmas pudding, and complex as a fine wine. Each sip revealed new layers, notes of toffee and caramel, hints of dark fruit, a warmth that spread from your chest outward. But tradition, no matter how cherished, couldn't survive the changing tides of British drinking culture. Corporate consolidation swept through the brewing industry, swallowing up small traditional breweries and their specialty beers. King and Barnes was acquired, then reacquired, each sale taking it further from its roots. The new owners looked at Old Ale's modest sales figures and made the inevitable decision: discontinuation. Imagine those cozy southern pubs on autumn evenings, log fires crackling in stone hearths, leather armchairs worn soft with age, the gentle murmur of civilized conversation. King and Barnes Old Ale was the perfect companion to these moments, dark, contemplative, warming, a drink that understood the value of taking time, of savouring life's quieter pleasures. But if you wanted strength over subtlety, there was one drink that packed everything into a small package. 5. Special brew. In every British pub, tucked away in small bottles like liquid dynamite, sat Special Brew, the drink that promised big things in a small package and delivered on that promise with interest. This wasn't ordinary beer. Special Brew was strong lager in miniature bottles, each one containing enough alcohol to make a proper statement. The distinctive bottles became familiar sights on pub tables across Britain, marking special occasions, promotions, farewells, victories, and defeats. But strength alone wasn't enough to guarantee survival in the changing world of British pubs. The problems began when health consciousness started creeping into British drinking culture. Special Brew's high alcohol content, once its selling point, became a liability. Younger drinkers didn't have the same relationship with ritual drinking. They wanted craft beers with interesting flavours, cocktails with Instagram appeal, or premium lagers that spoke of sophistication. Special Brew's working-class authenticity felt outdated, its strength unnecessary, its small bottles quaint rather than powerful. As the 80s dawned, even the most modern beers couldn't escape the changing tides. We're halfway through our journey of forgotten British pub classics. If you remember the weight of a Special Brew bottle in your hand, hit the like button and let us know in the comments which of these lost pints brings back the strongest memories. 6. Long Life. As the 70s faded into the 80s, one beer embodied the changing times perfectly. Long Life, a golden, easy-drinking lager that promised convenience and delivered refreshment until it quietly disappeared into the night. Long Life was beer for the modern age. Light, crisp and uncomplicated. Unlike the heavy bitters and complex ales that had dominated British pubs for generations, Long Life offered something different: refreshment without commitment, flavour without intimidation. Yet being perfectly suited to its time would ultimately become Long Life's greatest weakness. By the early 80s, the beer market was fragmenting rapidly. Drinkers wanted either premium lagers that felt sophisticated or traditional ales that connected them to heritage. Long Life occupied the dangerous middle ground. The golden beer that once felt modern began to feel generic, and generic was a death sentence in the increasingly competitive pub trade. But not all forgotten drinks were pure beer. Some were beautiful compromises that pleased everyone. 7. Shandy Bass. In the grand pantheon of British pub drinks, few were as perfectly balanced between beer and refreshment as Shandy Bass, the beer and lemonade mix that made drinking accessible to everyone, regardless of their tolerance for hops and bitterness. This wasn't pure beer, and it wasn't trying to be. Shandy Bass was the perfect compromise. Take Bass Ale, Britain's most famous beer, and soften its edges with lemonade, creating something refreshing, approachable, and utterly British. But approachable doesn't always translate to enduring, and even the most perfect compromises can become casualties of changing times. The decline began when drinking became more polarized. People wanted either proper beer or proper soft drinks. The middle ground occupied by Shandy Bass started to feel neither here nor there. The beautiful balance that made it special began to feel like fence-sitting in an age that valued authenticity over compromise. While some drinks were about compromise, others were about pure rebellion. 8. Blastaway. Every pub culture needs its rebels, and in British pubs, nothing said rebellion quite like Blastaway, the unofficial underground mix of cider and spirits that developed cult status among those who refused to follow the rules. This wasn't an official drink with marketing campaigns. Blastaway was a pure grassroots invention, created by drinkers who decided that if breweries wouldn't give them what they wanted, they'd make it themselves. The exact recipe varied from pub to pub, but the concept remained the same. Take strong cider, add spirits, and create something that would wake you up and keep you going. But rebellion that becomes too popular inevitably loses its rebellious edge. As the 80s progressed, pub culture became more regulated, more standardized, more corporate. The informal drink mixing that had given birth to Blastaway fell victim to licensing laws, health regulations, and chain pub policies. The cult status that had protected it ultimately couldn't save it from changing terms. But not all forgotten drinks were about rebellion. Some were about comfort and warmth. 9. Pony. In the corner of every proper British pub, often overlooked by casual drinkers, sat small bottles of Pony, sweet fortified wine that promised warmth and delivered comfort in miniature packages. Pony wasn't trying to compete with beer or spirits on their own terms. This was something entirely different, a sweet, warming drink that served a specific purpose for a specific audience. The fortified wine was rich, syrupy, and alcoholic enough to provide genuine warmth on cold nights. But even the most specialised drinks couldn't survive the homogenization of British pub culture. The problems began when pubs started targeting younger demographics who had no relationship with fortified wines and found the very concept of warming drinks old-fashioned. Chain pubs had no interest in carrying specialty items that sold slowly and appealed to diminishing customer bases. Our final drink takes us to the most innocent corner of pub culture, and perhaps its strangest. 10. Top Deck. Our journey through forgotten British pub drinks ends with perhaps the most unusual entry. Top Deck, the low-alcohol soft beer created specifically for children. A reminder that British pubs once served entire families, not just adult drinkers. Top Deck occupied a unique space in pub culture. Sweet, mildly alcoholic, and designed to give children a taste of grown-up drinking without the grown-up consequences. This allowed families to share pub experiences while keeping everyone's consumption appropriate to their age. But innocence, like everything else, couldn't survive the dramatic changes sweeping through British society. By the late 70s, attitudes toward children and alcohol were shifting rapidly. What had once seemed harmless family bonding began to look like inappropriate exposure to drinking culture. Top Deck's disappearance marked the end of family-friendly pub culture, replaced by age-segregated drinking that valued safety over tradition. The honourable mentions. Before we close, let's remember a few more casualties of changing times. Watkins Bitter, the Welsh working man's friend that disappeared with the coal mines, Mitchell's Mild, the perfect session beer for long afternoons, and Fremlin's Elephant IPA, whose distinctive label was as memorable as its hoppy bite. Each had its moment, its loyal following, its place in the grand tapestry of British drinking culture. These drinks didn't just disappear, they took with them entire ways of life, complete social ecosystems, irreplaceable aspects of British identity. They were more than beverages, they were liquid time machines, each sip connecting drinkers to traditions, communities, and memories that modern pub culture simply cannot replicate. Which of these do you remember most? Share your stories in the comments below. Tell us about your first special brew, the pub where you always ordered Chandy Bass, or the winter evening when Pony helped you through the cold. These memories matter, and together we can keep alive the liquid heritage of British pub culture.